Erev Tov Kibbutz Sasa. Good morning in Miami. Greetings to all of friends of Israel around the world who are tuning in with us today. We are on an absolutely gorgeous day here in the Washington, D.C. area where I am. Things are starting to bloom. Spring is here. And what better way to celebrate that by visiting some of our favorite sites. Admittedly, we're doing it virtually today, but hopefully it's going to bring some good tidings for the year to come. So first and foremost, welcome to everyone. I want to maybe ask if you could tell us in the chat where you're calling in from, and if indeed there are flowers blooming and you're starting to see some buds, tell us about the names of those flowers, because we're certainly going to hear about what's blooming today in the Galilee. My friend and colleague Reuven Solomon, who I've loved going on tours in Israel with and hearing his deep knowledge of the many places we visited over our series, 14 now and counting into the next month. And so lucky 13, Reuven, the Galilee, I know this is literally your backyard. Tell us a little bit about what we're going to see today and tell us about what's blooming, in your garden.
Wayne, thank you very much. And all our friends of the AIFL, a very warm greeting to you. We've just, today is the second day of a little bit of a heat wave that we're having. Everything is blooming. We had some cold weather before, but now it's a little bit of a heat wave that we're going to enjoy, maybe, for the next 5 or 6 days before it gets back to normal. Today, I have the great pleasure of taking you in to my backyard. But before we do that, I want to hope that you've all had a wonderful Easter, a great Passover, and for those of you who are celebrating Ramadan, Ramadan Kareem. Today, we're going to be heading to literally my backyard. In a moment, the map will be up and I'll be able to describe to you the area in Israel that we call the Upper Galilee. You see that yellow square right at the top of the map of Israel bordering Lebanon. If you stretch that yellow square to the border of the Golan Heights with Israel, including that little finger that pokes into Lebanon on one side and the Golan Heights on the other side, that actually is the area that we call the Upper Galilee area. We're not going to be visiting all of the Upper Galilee. We have to leave some things for next time. We're going to be concentrating on the western part of the Upper Galilee, literally my backyard. On the map on the right-hand side, you can see where Kfar Vradim is, and that's my house, my suburb. It was started actually in 1984 by Steph Wertheimer, an industrialist who was a one-time politician in Israel, and he created this gated community mainly to afford housing to the many people who were coming into another establishment of Steph Wertheimer's, the Teffen incubator, or as some call it, hothouse for high-tech industries. Very successful, and so is Kfar Vradim. Kfar Vradim, the Village of Roses. We will take a short drive through parts of Kfar Vradim, and our neighboring city, Ma'alot Tarshiha, which is a fascinating city. It makes me very proud to be living in this part of Israel, because let me tell you that the Upper Galilee, especially the western part of the Upper Galilee, is a wonderful example of coexistence, where in Tarshiha, as we take a quick visit there as well on our drive, we combination of, in 1963, a Jewish township, Ma'alot, combining with Tarshiha, an Israeli Arab township, and today it's one city, one municipality, and harmony reigns, cooperation and relationships between the different minorities are great in the Upper Galilee, and I'm hoping that we're going to be serving as an example to all the rest. After we have a very short visit through to Kfar Vradim and Ma'alot Tarshicha, we're going to drive to Peki'in, which is a city with some fascinating history that goes all the way back to the Second Temple period. And we'll talk about that when we get there. And after our visit to Peki'in and the cave of Rashbi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, we will drive to the northwestern corner of Israel that borders with Lebanon and the Mediterranean, and visit one of Israel's most exciting, beautiful nature sites, Rosh HaNikra. So let's get started. We'll have a little drive through the Village of Roses, Kfar Vradim, and enjoy the ride. Tarshicha. Many gardens in Kfar Vradim, including in the front of my house. When you come to visit, you'll see that it is blooming. Okay, so now we're in Ma'alot. The lake you see is an artificial lake. Sculptures and waterfalls and decoration all the way through. Ma'alot was established mainly by immigrants from many places, including Morocco, and thus you saw a quick visit to the pioneers there. But what you're looking at now is something that Ma'alot is very proud of. Every year, except for the last one, we've had a Stone in the Galilee festival where artists from all over the world come and create their works of art that decorate all of the area. This is Tarshicha, the town in between the city of Ma'alot and Kfar Vradim, that is part Ma'alot Tarshicha, the city of. It's made up mainly about 6,000 people again, made up mainly of Christian, Muslim, and a smattering of Druze Arabs. Now we've having a quick glimpse at some of the nature surrounding my beautiful neighborhood. That's Nahal Ziv, the Ziv River. And there are lots of attractive sites all around, minutes away by foot in some cases, and mainly by car to some of the exciting places in Israel. One of them is where we're standing now, Peki'in. Peki'in is a village slightly east of Kfar Vradim in the Upper Galilee that has a history goes all the way back to the Second Temple period. Our Jewish sources and travelers since have told us that some families, priestly families from 70 AD, when Titus the Roman destroys the Second Temple, escape Jerusalem and find refuge far away from Jerusalem in the Upper Galilee in a township called Peki'in at that stage. And its name since has changed to, in the 4th, 5th century already, Peki'in, which actually means in between the mountains. They find these priestly families find refuge in this town, and to this very day, we have descendants of these families that found and refuge there, living in the city, with only one small break of 3 years between the years 1936 and 1939, and I'll talk about that a little further on, where there was no presence of any Jews in Peki'in. But once again today, there's a presence of ancestors of the Israelites from the destruction of Jerusalem in its time. What we're looking at here.
Reuven, there's a question about how to get to Peki'in, if it's still that narrow road, or if that's been widened at all.
Great question. It is a very narrow road, and I'm going to be taking you driving along it, Wayne. We'll have to be careful.
All right, in that case, I'll put my seatbelt on.
You'll have to have your seatbelt on, but it's worth the scary ride. One can actually access from the main road and do a little bit of walking up and downhill as well. But driving is quite exciting in Peki'in. The main square there, where an ancient mulberry tree is growing beside a spring, where one can enjoy some Druze delicacies, rice-filled lamb, and the many salads that the Druze offer. A wonderful, relaxing place to sit, enjoy a great meal, and soak in the atmosphere of Peki'in. It's been said that when you come to Peki'in, you should take off your wristwatch, because time doesn't matter there. You're in a different period. And one such person who came into Peki'in became our second president of the state of Israel. His name was Yitzhak Ben Zvi. And he, in 1907, made Aliyah, came to Palestine. And being a historian, he knew the history of Peki'in and the existence of descendants from 70 AD in this town. He also knew that Peki'in in the 2nd century served again as a place of refuge during the Bar Kokhba period. So one of his first things that he did in Palestine, as the country was known then, was to come and visit and look for these descendants of the Kohanim, the priestly families from Jerusalem. He comes here in 1922. This picture that you're going to see in just a moment is not from 1922, it's from the 1930s, but this is the Jewish community of Peki'in, with a few visitors, as you can see by their dress. Very quickly, you can see the townspeople and see the visitors. And this picture I've included in order to illustrate to you that the Jews of Peki'in melded into, they were at this stage already a little less than a fourth of the population, and they melded very well into the atmosphere of the village life with their Arab neighbors, who were mainly Druze, Christian Arabs, and Muslim Arabs. Yitzhak Ben Zvi, the village looked like, you're going to see what it looked like when he comes to see it. This photo is from the early 30s, late 20s maybe, of this tiny village in between the hills of Peki'in. When Yitzhak Ben Zvi comes to this village, he finds the synagogue that he knew, although it was only when he came 50 years old or so, he knew that it was built on the very same spot that the Kohanim 2,000 years ago, had built their study hall. And in the time of the Bar Kokhba revolt, and the second use as a refuge for Jews escaping the Romans, they built their synagogue here. And he actually, on his poking around in Pekin, in the courtyard of the synagogue, is amongst the discoverers of a capital that you're going to see in a moment, a Roman capital, that confirms that this was where the ancient synagogue stood, as well as the study hall from the time of Rashbi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. You know,
Reuven, we have a couple of questions. Obviously, people have been to Pekin and seen it, and the synagogue. One of the questions is, does the Shamash family still have a remnant there taking care of that synagogue?
Absolutely, a wonderful question. You may, if you've been to Pekin and visited the synagogue, then you know Margalit Zinati. Margalit Zinati, the Zinati family, apart from those 3 years, 36 to 39, 1936 to 1939, have had a presence in Pekin. You're going to, in a moment, the person who asked the question, you're going to see a photo of Margalit celebrating about 3 years ago, maybe even 4 years ago, her 86th birthday. She's still there. And she has been joined by many other Jews, many of them descendants from the families who were in the, what we call Hadera exile, and I'll talk about the Hadera exile in a moment, that happened in those 3 years. And now they are also returning, amongst other Jews, returning to live, I'm sorry, returning to live in Pekin. So yes, she still has the key to the synagogue, although there is an institution now built beside the synagogue that helps her with this work. Yes, Wade.
So Reuven, in addition, going back to the ancient Jewish community that was there, would they have been Greek speakers? And is there any evidence of what life was like during that early period?
They, according to the inscriptions, we know they were Hebrew speakers and Aramaic speakers maybe earlier. The inscriptions on the capital from the 2nd century AD are in Hebrew. And we know from the writings of in the Mishnah and the Talmud that Pekin was a center of Jewish study, especially after the Bar Kokhba revolt. Now, I want to tell you that we've commemorated Yitzhak Ben Zvi's attachment to Pekin by issuing 2 successive 100 shekel notes. This is 100 shekels that became, although it says new shekelim, it was very quickly devalued and it replaced, and another note was replaced. The portrait you see is of Yitzhak Ben Zvi. If you look at the bottom note, look at this note. This replaced the out of circulation old note, and this one now is also almost out of total circulation. But if you look carefully at the note, you're going to see the synagogue door and window, the backside of the note on the left-hand side, with the synagogue door and window of it, parts of Pekin. If you look through to the right-hand note, you may be able to make out some of the square and the mulberry tree. And Yitzhak Ben Zvi fell in love with Pekin and made sure that the synagogue was well looked after when he became president in 1952. And Margalit, when she has visitors, will talk about how he was such a benefactor of the Jewish community in Pekin. Even though they dwindled for a short period of time, they dwindled to one. She was the one and only when her family, brothers and so on, married off and went otherwise. She stayed, she's still there, and she's been joined by many others.
Reuven, we have another, the questions are coming through, so I want to intersperse them where we can. Emmy is
Sure.
asking about the name Peki'in. What does that mean?
In between the hills,
Uh,
Peki'in, in between the hills, because it's nestled in the hills. It's on a hill itself, actually. You know, a stamp was also issued honoring Peki'in, and you'll see it in the next slide, and it will give us an indication of the synagogue. What you're seeing is the synagogue the way it looks today on the top part, with one of the two stones that were found, that were reputed to have been taken from the second temple that was destroyed and used, displayed in the study hall from the 1st century and the 2nd century and 3rd century until they actually made their way into the synagogue that is described as the modern synagogue today. And the two stones can be seen here in the top and the bottom. The top stone with the menorah, of course, and the lulav, the palm frond, and the incense shovel. And the bottom stone, you'll see it more clearly on the stone itself when we move to it in just a moment. The perhaps the entrance to the Holy of Holies. We're not sure, but it's a wonderful depiction of it. This is the way the synagogue looks today. And in the next slide, you're going to see the stones I spoke about. This is the entrance to the first entrance, we suspect, to the Holy of Holies, or a Torah shrine from the temple, believed to have actually been taken by these exiles along with the other stone from the temple itself. And the next stone is a close-up of the menorah that you'll see with the incense shovel and the lulav. Now, I mentioned a capital that Yitzhak ben Zvi had actually helped discover with Hebrew inscriptions. You're going to see a picture of it in just in the next slide. But before then, you'll see the synagogue before multiple renovations. You won't recognize this today. In the next slide, after one of the renovations, and it's been renovated even more since, if you look to the left-hand side, you'll see embedded in the wall the stone I was referring to with the menorah. And in the next slide, you'll see the capital I spoke of with Hebrew inscriptions that indicate to us that this modern synagogue, when I say modern, I'm talking about middle, late 19th century, is actually built on the ancient synagogue. I want to read you something from travelers and censors who counted people in Peki'in. In 1875, French explorer Victor Guérin visited the village and described it as follows. The population at present numbers 600. Druze, United Greeks, Schematic Greeks, and a few Jewish families who descend from the ancient inhabitants of the country. Every year in the summer, several hundreds of Jews come here from Tiberias to pass the hot season. Most of these Jews came originally from Europe and are happy in finding here the last indigenous sons of the ancient national stock. At Bukia, that was what it was also known as, thanks to the two springs which issue from the hillside, they cultivate on the slopes and almost to the bottom of the valley, delicious gardens watered by numerous streams. Here grow on different terraces kept up by great walls, probably ancient, fruit trees of all kinds, such as citrons, oranges, pomegranates, figs, quinces, and mulberries. They also raised silk, incidentally, silkworms. That's why the mulberry trees. The vine flourishes marvelously, as is shown by the enormous trunks. The United Greeks have a little church, which I found shut. The Schismatic Greeks also have one which has replaced a much more ancient Christian sanctuary. Only a few cut stones and a trunk of a column remain of it. The Jews worship in a synagogue of modern date, written in 1875. In 1881, the Palestinian Exploration Fund has a survey of Palestine Western Palestine, and describes Peki'in as a good village built of stone, containing a chapel and a synagogue. There are about 100 Muslims, 100 Christians, 100 Druze, and 100 Jews. It is situated on the slope of the hill with gardens, figs, olives, pomegranates, and arable land. There is a good spring in the village and 2 springs nearby. This is the only place where Jews cultivate the ground. They say it has descended to them from their fathers from time immemorial. A population list from about 1887 showed Bukia to have about 950 inhabitants, Druze, Jews, and Christians. Now, as I said, this was not the very first time that in the 70 AD that Peki'in served as a refuge for Jews. Once again in the Bar Kokhba revolt, and soon we will talk in more detail about it. In the Bar Kokhba revolt, we have once again Jews seeking refuge in Peki'in. In the next couple of slides, you're going to see the woman I talked about, Margalit, celebrating her birthday. 86th birthday. This is about 3 years ago. She's still there. And those of you who have visited Peki'in have made acquaintance with Margalit, who tells us the stories of passed from generation to generation of the Hadera exiles. They actually left Peki'in, Jews, in 1936, when the infamous Kauji and the Arab marauding gangs set up their headquarters in Peki'in during the period of the Arab riots, where Jews were, where they were a minority, were in great danger. But here the citizens, their fellow neighbors, Muslims, Druze, and Christian Arabs, made sure they were safe. They arranged a safe exile for the Jews of Peki'in to Hadera, which is in between Haifa and Tel Aviv, a coastal town in between Haifa and Tel Aviv. And they, to this day, the descendants of the Jews who moved out, and as I said, their descendants are now coming back to live in Peki'in, call this the Hadera exile to this day. But they have never forgotten how their Muslim, Druze, and Christian Arab neighbors saved them from a terrible fate. So once again, an example of coexistence, mutual respect in the Upper Galilee.
Reuven, someone had a question about the picture you showed earlier on the synagogue. Apparently, the question is whether there are grills over the windows today, because it wasn't depicted in the photo that you showed.
Yes, exactly. They are protected, of course, because in modern times we have thieves, unfortunately, everywhere. And just like the marauding gangs came from outside Peki'in to cause the trouble, thieves can also come from outside to steal. So that's why. But here we're back in the main square, where you will get a touch of life from all the different communities in Peki'in: the Druze, the Muslims, the Christians. And following these two slides, we're going to take that scary ride I told you about. So put your seatbelts on, and we're going to go for a ride through Peki'in. And let me tell you, as we start our ride, that this is probably the widest street in Peki'in that you can find today. Don't be mistaken, it is two ways, and big trucks also come up and down. And the houses, as described so long ago, are stone. Now, you have to be very sharp driving in Pekin, because tractors and trucks and cars come screaming around the corner very fast, and you should be able to hear them before they come around so that you can be alert and make the noises yourself. But it's quite an experience. And as I said, I assure you, this is the widest street that we're driving along in Pekin. It gets a little narrower as we head towards our destination, the square itself, but one needs to be specially alert driving through these streets. You know, they were built not for cars, they were built for donkey and cart, but the metal donkeys push their way through today. And as I said, if you want excitement, drive through Pekin.
If we're going to get to the central well.
If we're going to get to once again, I didn't hear you.
The central well.
Oh yes, we're at the square. That's where we end our drive in just a moment. And that's where we started as well, where the Druze restaurants were. But here we are in.
So will we get to stop and get free samples at the Druze restaurant?
You have to come and do this, not virtually, really taste the lamb filled with rice and delicious foods that the Druze offer. It really is especially delicious and super relaxing. We're almost at the square now, just making our way around the corner. And we've arrived in the heart of, if you like, Pekin, at the square, marked by the many restaurants and the mulberry tree, the famous mulberry tree, and the spring right beside. A lovely place to sit, to relax, to have a good meal, and then to walk up the hill a little bit to the cave of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and that's going to be our next stop. So as we leave Pekin, we're here at the Rashby Cave. Rashby is an acronym for Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and I'll quickly tell you the story. It's a story and a legend of the second time after about 100 years that Pekin serves again as a refuge for Jews escaping the Romans. It is told that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yossi are sitting in a study hall in Usha, somewhere lower down in the Galilee, where they're discussing the Romans. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai hears Rabbi Yehuda say, the Romans are not so bad. They build roads, bridges, bathhouses that we enjoy. They're not that bad. We can live with them. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, they build these roads and bridges to better control us. And the bathhouses are not for us. They're for their own lewd purposes. Someone snitches on Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai to the Romans. And remember, this is just after the Bar Kokhba revolt in the time of Hadrian, who is still alive. And Rabbi Shimon and his son Elazar escape to Pekin for refuge. And there they find that, chased by Roman soldiers, legend has it, they run by a cave that they quickly enter. The cave is there, and that's where you're going to have a look at it, where as soon as they're in the cave, a spider spins its web magically to the entrance cave, making it clear that no one could have passed through this web without demolishing it. So they're saved from capture by the Roman soldiers, who run past this cave with a web in its closure, and they spend a total of 13 years in the cave, living off the spring beside it and a carob tree. And after a short respite of a break, they come back for the final year, where, according to most Jewish traditions, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai composes and writes down HaZohar, the Enlightening. That is the handbook of Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism. The others allocate it to another author, but most accept that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, in this cave with his son, composed and wrote down the handbook of Jewish mysticism, HaZohar. You know, talking about legends and spiders, I have to tell you a quick one. You know, legends have a means of repeating themselves in different traditions. And there is an old Bedouin legend that a similar event takes place with Muhammad when he is escaping the pagan Arab soldiers in Medina. A step ahead of them, he darts into a cave, and there, once again, a spider spins its web, fooling the pagan soldiers not to look in. But the legend goes on to say that across from the opening of the cave was a lizard sitting on a rock. And this lizard, if those of you are familiar with these lizards know what I'm talking about, stood on this rock and nodded its head like this towards the opening of the cave, trying to indicate to the soldiers that Muhammad was in there. Fortunately for Muhammad, they didn't see the lizard and they passed by. But to this day, Bedouin boys, when they see a lizard, will throw stones at it, because the lizard almost betrayed the prophet. And the legend ends by saying that if one is able to kill 7 lizards, the Bedouin legend, if one is able to kill 7 lizards with one blow without pre-arranging it, then this is the equivalent of a Hajj, a visit to Mecca. So legends repeat them. You get another view of the cave, and then we're going to move on.
Reuven, there's a question about, not about lizards, but about mikvahs. Any remnants in the area showing mikvahs?
Yes, there are, and the spring itself could have easily been used as a natural mikvah. But there hasn't been extensive. There had to be mikvah, of course, not far from the Bet HaMidrash, the study hall, and there are indications that the spring would have been used for that purpose. Next slide, and we'll have another view of the Star of David in Peki'in, and then we will make our journey to one of the most beautiful nature sites in all of Israel, Rosh HaNikra. Rosh HaNikra, Ras Nikura from the Arabic, this is the Hebraized, actually means literally the head of the grotto. And here, Rosh HaNikra in Hebrew means the same. Nikra, the tear in the rock, the head of the tear in the rock that creates this beautiful nature site. This nature site is in a unique position in the northwestern corner of Israel, at the bottom of what we call the ladder of Tyre, Sulam Tzor in Hebrew. And in the next slide, you're going to see an old card, a postcard with gives us a wonderful view from the middle of it. You're looking at those one direction cliffs, and then it turns directions all the way through to the Lebanon. That is where we are literally going to be, right in that spot there, where the turn is in the middle of that picture. The ladder of Tyre, because It was a road, an ancient route through for armies from the beginning of time. Some of the route had actually been cut in steps, especially close to the crossing into Israel of today. And we assume that it might have been Alexander the Great's army that cut these steps in. We have references to the ladder of Tyre from Josephus and from the book of Maccabees and from other ancient historians. But the ladder of Tyre is a sheer cliff that goes all the way from Rosh HaNikra down towards Tyre, creating a formidable barrier, a natural barrier between the Lebanon and Tyre. When you have a good boundary, it probably means better relations, and this might explain the very good relations that King Solomon and King David had with the King Hiram in the Lebanon and Tyre. In the next couple of pictures, I'm going to be able to share with you that at Rosh HaNikra, once upon a time, the only way to visit the caves, and we're going to have a look at some of these caves, but once upon a time, the only way to visit the caves was to actually swim into them from the sea. There was no access from above. It is only in 1964 that Israel decided to build a cable car down to the sea level and then cut a tunnel through to join the caves together so that people who didn't swim or don't swim could actually walk through, enjoying the caves that are absolutely spectacular. So in order to do this, the cable car had to be built. It's a drop of 70 meters at an angle of 60 degrees, and it is reputed to be the shortest and steepest cable car ride in the world. It's a very short ride. The views are breathtaking going down by cable car. And actually, when we get down to ground level, there were people who made it easier for us beforehand. What you're looking at here is just as you exit the caves, this is the landmark of Rosh HaNikra. When any Israeli sees this, he immediately knows where it is. We call it the elephant's foot. Some people see the trunk of the elephant in the sea and its head, and then the feet of the elephant on solid ground. It actually indicates for us Rosh HaNikra. We are going to have a view of what made it a little easier for us, Israel, in 1964 to actually access this area, because it is right at the top is where the passage is for the UN through to the Israeli border pass, to the UN post, and then the Lebanese post beyond that in a matter of meters. And Rosh HaNikra is right there. You can see that Beirut is much closer to where we are at now than Jerusalem is. Half the time that it would take you to get to Jerusalem, you're in Beirut through Sidon and Tzor and all the way along the coast. The Brits actually made it easier for us because they start building a roadway just after the British Mandate begins in 1917 in order to connect through Beirut and Damascus, Cairo. And in the next slide, you're going to see, we're looking from the Israeli side now to the cliff. The next slide, you're going to see the tunnel that the Brits start digging in just before the Second World War and through the beginning of the first part of the Second World War, a tunnel that will connect Haifa, which is connected to all the way through to Cairo, of course, to Beirut. That was their aim, and they actually complete it. And in the next slide, you're going to see the continuation of this tunnel. It's quite formidable. The rail tracks are still there. And believe it or not, trains actually ran And here, they can't run anymore because you're looking now from the Israeli side to the dead end. It wasn't a dead end. It's a dead end now. It's been blocked in after the bridge leading through to this tunnel was blown up by Israel preceding the War of Independence. This train that took this actually on a couple of occasions, on more than a couple of occasions, actually transported goods and people, including some Holocaust survivors. The kinder transport, actually, some of those who were involved in the kinder transport had one journey through by this route before it had to be blown up. Why did it have to be blown up and sealed? Because Israel had intelligence that the Arabs in the beginning of the War of Independence were intending to bring troops in via the rail. Thus today, that sealed tunnel just beyond is Lebanon, where the tunnel continues, incidentally, serves as an auditorium for the short film that one can see there in remembering the beauty of Rosh HaNikra and how the caves were created. Here you see from the beginnings of the British Mandate, the 1920s, 1930s, the British soldier, Indian British soldier, serving as part of the guard on the creation of the roadway. In the next slide, you're going to see that the Anzacs had part of it as well. You see the sign pointing the arrow down with NZ, New Zealand. New Zealand forces were also used to build this rail bridge, and these sandbags that look like pillows to support the rail track alongside today are like cement bags, because they were once sandbags, but with the salt and the sea and everything else, they are as solid can be. We are now going to enjoy, first of all, I want to tell you that there are three strata really at Rosh HaNikra. The top, which is limestone with nari coating and some dolomite, keeps the softer part of these cliffs all the way along, incidentally, all the way through to Lebanon, which is soft chalk that was sedimentary seabed when the sea was much more shallow. And the flint in this soft rock may have been created by remnants of volcanic explosions and volcanic rock settling in this soft flint. And some of it, of course, from the fossils, incidentally, in this soft rock, you can still see many fossilized plant life and snail life. Talking about snail life, but we don't have time for that. Along these shores were where they made that purple dye from the murex. Now we're going to take a little bit of a walk along this specially created tunnel to view some of the beautiful grotto caves created by the rushing water beating away at the softer rock above and the hard rock down below, because the seabed rock, the seashore rock, is hard rock. And it is really where one never tires visiting. I've been there dozens of times, and it's never boring. You know why? It's different every time, because at every different hour of the day, it has a different look. At every different mood of the sea, a calm sea, a rough sea, a medium sea, it has a different aspect. And one can never tire from the beauty of this site with gorgeous colors everywhere you look. It took, of course, millions of years for the, at least hundreds of years for the sea to make its way in and eat away at the calcareous limestone to create these beautiful grottos. And what a great plan it was to link them by digging a tunnel alongside, allowing a visitor to see, without having to jump into the water and swim, to see these beautiful caves. Let me tell you that if one is on a hot summer's day in need for some cooling down, this is where you should be standing, where I'm standing now, because boy, oh boy, you get a salt cold water shower very quickly. And I've been there and done that. It's very exciting. And you dry off very quickly in the summer. But many people choose to stand aside and watch other people get drenched. But it's beautiful each time you see it, different each time you see it. Just look at the colors. It's a wonderful walkthrough. One needs to have good rubber-soled shoes, not the slip, because as you can see, the path get it. But you can visit and stay dry, just as you're doing so now. Wayne, if there are any questions, this would be a great time, because
first of all, Reuven, I think a lot of people want to literally jump out and come visit. Just the visuals of the water in the grottoes there is so evocative of the special place that it is. But let's start a little on logistics. If somebody wanted to, we know that people in Israel, this is a time where people like to go on a tiyul, go on a trip to the north, and see everything that you showed with the flowers blooming. So first of all, how long would it take to get to Tel Aviv? And is there a way to get up to both Rosh HaNikra or Peki'in? How would you do that if you didn't have a car?
Absolutely. One could take a train anywhere in the Tel Aviv, for instance, to Nahariya, which is as far north as the train will take you. And then from Nahariya, buses to Peki'in to Rosh HaNikra are all available from the Nahariya bus station. So one without a car, using public transport, can actually access these places.
That's great to hear. Now, I mean, the question for people today is, are these sites open? Particularly the cable cars, what of the tourism infrastructure as we're speaking today, just after Yom Ha'atzmaut, things are beginning to open up. Are these sites open now for people to come visit safely?
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. There are sites that are enclosed, requirement for masks. Today, the lifting of the necessity to have masks outdoors has been enacted. So we're on our way. The nature parks all have been opened. The nature sites have been opened. Up until now, when we do actually need to book in advance so that they're not overcrowded. But I'm thinking that very soon all these restrictions, thank goodness, will also go away and we'll be back to normal.
Reuven, a couple of weeks ago, we did a segment involving a number of panelists from Israel involved in Israel's green movement, and we saw some of the shocking impact of the oil spill place along various aspects, various sites along Israel's coast. Can you give us any indication whether this particular area in Rosh HaNikra, if there were reports that they experienced any of the damage, and generally what the status is now of those cleanups?
Thank goodness it didn't get as far north up to Rosh HaNikra or even to Akziv, but the further south beaches were hit badly. Once again, Israel showed her strength in citizens mobilizing without any organized call for it, mobilizing, going down to the shore with bags and gloves and dressed appropriately, cleaning up. And much wildlife was saved, especially little turtles. And you know, where Rosh HaNikra is where these turtles breed, but they go all along the shore, of course. And many little turtles were rescued, cleaned up, and only a couple of days ago released back into the sea, into home. So once again, sometimes you see the strengths when there's a problem to be overcome. And
Reuven, I want to go back to your hometown in the city of roses, Kfar Radim. I recall doing a number of trips when my kids were young in Shvil Norman, which was just a short distance from your city. Is that still a popular spot for families to take hikes?
Absolutely, absolutely. There are so many places literally in walking distance from this area that any visitor to Israel has to spend a couple of nights in the north. I would say at least 2 nights in the north to see this area much more extensively, because there's so much to see. For instance, literally walking from my house, you could get to Nahal Ziv, which is a beautiful river, a stream that goes right below Montfort Castle, a Crusader castle that remains surprisingly intact, considering the damage that the Mamluks did to Crusader sites. And it's, once again, a wonderful trip and a hike. Everywhere you look around, look there. Also, we could have visited so many different places, like the sculpture park in Carmiel, for instance.
Well, we still have to do that. You're not off the hook on that. That is actually such a special place. And when you show the images from Ma'alot of the sculptures in the rock that you're greeted year after year from the competition that they've left behind, it's really, as you're saying, such a mix of nature, of history, outdoor beauty, and of course the culinary wonderment of coexistence of very different kinds of foods and flavors, and all of the natural herbs that come from the region, which are often cooked very, very authentically into the local dishes. So I think we had a huge turnout for the webinar today, and registration, even though the weather was really beautiful, at least in some parts of the United States. But we are looking forward to coming back and visiting this region and other regions that you've toured with us over the past year. We're not stopping. We're going to continue our series and continue to explore. And each month, as we always do in this wonderful series, we invite everyone to come back to share the links, as we do, for free with your friends, so more people can explore and start planning in their head, put together the bucket list of all the places you've missed and that you want to go, you want to experience in person, because we'll be there waiting for you. I know Reuven will be there with a big smile and a big hug once we're able to return to real hugs and not just virtual hugs. We know we're getting closer as many of us become vaccinated, and hopefully we've turned a bit of a corner. We'll be bringing you here, your friends at America-Israel Friendship League. We've not run out of material. We have, if anything, discovered more. And next week, I'm so glad that to announce that we will be inaugurating a new series with the Zuckerman Institute that will begin this coming Wednesday at noon Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Israel time. Choose your time zone to be correct. But this is a series on popular science, where we are going to be meeting pairs of scientists from Israel and the United States that are collaboratively working on the topics of the future and making it understandable, relevant for each of us. And our very first episode of the series is dedicated to the topic of aging, and actually extending aging, meaning looking at how science is working to extend life by looking at other life forms that last time. I don't know how many, I don't think we'll be looking at lizards based on the Bedouin story we heard from Reuven, but we are going to be looking at a fish this coming Wednesday to find out what fish is going to tell us whether we could live ad mea bit asrim, whether we could actually live to 120 and beyond. That is the subject of this fascinating research. So we invite everyone to join us again on Wednesday, and of course next Sunday, as we do each week, to bring you exciting new ways to get through this period together and beyond, to explore the bridge of friendship between the United States and Israel and our new friends around the world. Thanks everyone for being with us. Have a safe week and enjoy the rest of your weekend.